Okay, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you're logging in from. We're super happy to have you here today on behalf of the RCTLE team. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Cody Sire. I currently serve as the team lead for the College of Business Support team, and I'm supported by my wonderful colleagues, Dr. Liz Cummins and Miss Linda Rowell. And together we make up the RCTLE College Support team. The COB series is kind of a passion project of ours that's grown this year and kind of evolved, where we really work to highlight different topics, highlight different speakers and presenters, and really just kind of discuss and learn more about some relevant topics in higher education. And we're super excited this month to have a panel with some of our Embry-Riddle professional colleagues who also are currently taking courses, just to kind of gain some insights from the perspective of the current student learner and just really gain some insights to share to help improve our own practices. So without further ado, I would like to take time here to introduce our panelists. So if you don't mind turning off your cameras just to kind of keep everybody on the main screen, so for easier visibility, that would be wonderful. Please do throughout the presentation, feel free to jump in on the chat if you have any questions for the panelists or if there's any topics you'd like to further explore. This is meant to be a very organic, natural conversation. So we're really excited to have you here today. And I'd like to start today by introducing Miss Jackie Folco. She is one of our e-learning integration specialists with academic technology, and I'm sure a lot of you have worked with her indirectly, but Jackie, take it away. We'd love to hear your story as a student.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. So like you said, my name is Jackie, and I'm currently enrolled in the Master's Leadership Program. I'm about halfway through right now. And the thing that I really wanted to talk about today was some of the struggles I face as a student because I have an autoimmune disease, and that causes significant amount of pain, stress on my body, and then exhaustion because of having to deal with that disease. So one of the things that really is a struggle because of it is being able to turn work in on time and being able to be flexible with deadlines and due dates. And I make a point to, because I grew up with this disease, I kind of diminish it a little bit, where I keep it to myself and I don't really talk about it as much. And when I do, I'm very careful about when I do, because I don't like for people to assume that I can't do something because of it. But then that becomes a problem of advocating for myself, especially when it comes to schoolwork. So it takes a lot of mental power for me to come to a professor and say, I have this problem. I need help with extra time on work or something like that, because I don't necessarily want special treatment. But the professors that I have come to and talked to about it, there's been a couple of them that have been incredibly supportive about it and have been willing to work on whatever I need to make it beneficial for myself. And those are the professors that stand out in my mind, because they were they were willing to work with me, because it, as much as I diminish it and keep it to myself, it's hard to push through it and do it alone. So those are the pieces, those are the experiences I really want to share with you guys today. For example, at the beginning of this year, or I guess not this year, it's already 2021. The beginning of 2020, I had a third major reconstructive surgery on my foot that left me unable to walk for weeks on end. And I was in the middle of a term at the time. And my professor was super helpful. I had written about my experiences because a lot of what I was going through at work played into that leadership role of being able to talk about what my leaders did to support me. And as a result, one of the papers I wrote was about the back and forth struggle that I had during that time. And my professor actually, rather than writing me a response in the little chat in the speed grader, he did a video. It was like a 1.5-minute video where he was talking in the video and kind of just talking about what I experienced and what I was writing about in my essay, but it meant a lot to me at the time. And then, as you can imagine, about the time I was about to be able to walk, COVID happened. And then I couldn't go anywhere. Like everybody else couldn't go anywhere. I already couldn't do that months prior, but then adding COVID on top of that. And then I had some more problems with recovery, where I had to have like a wound vac that I carried around for a month, like a little purse on my shoulder here, and that was added struggles. So all of those things, the fact that that professor had made that connection with me, that human connection, to be able to make me feel like he was listening and actually hearing my story or hearing what I was going through at that time, was incredibly helpful as I continued to struggle throughout that course. I did well in the end of that course, but it hit me really hard. I feel like I'm getting emotional. I'm sorry. I didn't expect that. but yeah, that's the story I really wanted to share with you guys, is just that little bit goes a long way. It really does. That's my story.
Jackie, I really appreciate you opening up and sharing such a personal perspective. And I think that's really powerful. I think in the virtual climate, but specifically with COVID and kind of the influx of virtual environment, that relatability and that humanity is so important to remember,
Yes.
even outside of COVID. But I think it definitely heightens those emotions. So thank you for sharing your
Yeah.
story and your journey with all of us.
Thank you.
Our next panelist, I have the pleasure to say, is just a few miles down the road from me here in Germany. Miss Kindle Strobeli. She is the campus director for the Spingdalum, Germany campus, and is a military spouse herself and actively supports military students here in Germany and around the European theater. So, Kindle, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Cody. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm just a couple miles really down the road from Cody, like she said. And I've been here in Germany living for just over 2 years. I've been working with ERAU for about a year and a half. My previous work experience before here was in higher education. So I have experience at the community college as well as the university level. And I was really lucky to kind of fall into this current position that I have, because finding jobs in higher ed as a military spouse, especially overseas, can be very, very challenging. So I've been very lucky to be able to find this position, and hopefully as I continue on wherever it is that the military sends us, I'll be able to continue to work with this organization, because it's been awesome. So I'm speaking to you not only as a military spouse and as a representative of that community, but also to kind of represent all of our students that we serve over here internationally, not just in the European theater, but also for our folks over in PACOM, as well as, obviously our other international locations that we have. So as many of you are probably aware, there's some very unique sort of challenges that we face being over here. Obviously, first and foremost, one of those is the time zone difference. And most primarily in my time as a student, there's kind of two areas that I've seen that can cause the largest challenge. And one of those is with office hours with instructors. And as a student, as somebody who works directly with students, I'm always encouraging them to reach out to their instructors and inform them of these, within usually those first couple of days, that they are located overseas and that the time zones are different, and that if they, need to work with their instructors outside of the normal trajectory of the course, to reach out and ask them from the outside of office hours. But I have had a few instructors who have actually done that work for me after my initial post. They've reached out and said, hey, I noticed that you're overseas, and that, if my time zone or if my office hours don't work for you, please let me know when a good time is. I'm happy to meet with you out of class. And that really does just take a little bit of pressure off of me. Because sometimes it can feel like I'm almost, not a burden, but can feel like I'm almost trying, I understand that instructors sometimes work other jobs and they have other things going on. And so for me to ask you to work outside of those hours can be a little bit of a struggle for me, because I don't want to inconvenience anyone. So when that happens initially, it kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off of me, which I'm always very thankful for. So time zones can be challenging in that sense, but they can also be challenging with like group projects. And so being assigned to a group where all of my other teammates are located in the States is a huge struggle, because coordinating a time with other folks who might work full time or have other jobs that they're doing for me, it's the end of the day for me. So, or, early in the morning for them. And so having to find a time that works for everyone when I'm the only person that's overseas can not only create a challenge in meeting with my teammates, but also just in how I feel like I'm able to participate in those group projects. It's not necessarily I don't necessarily feel as involved in the process as I would hope to be in a lot of those instances. And so while I understand that there's probably not a lot of times that you might have a student who's overseas, if you do notice that you've got a couple of folks who might be located elsewhere, far away, in an area that might be challenging, maybe ensuring that they're connecting with each other, but also if there's any way to help them work together in some capacity, it just would mean that I would get the chance to at least interact on a somewhat normal basis with somebody who is closer to me, and it would help me feel a little bit more connected with what's going on. The other thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit outside of the time zone differences in terms of challenges is that the lifestyles that we are in here overseas can be very isolating. And so a lot of times being in a class for me has been a way for me to make connections, both personally and professionally, with folks outside of my normal community, specifically in COVID. Things here in Europe have been very shut down. And so it really is a way for me to engage with people and to make those connections and just feel like I'm a part of something outside of this military lifestyle, because this is what I live and I do this and I've done it for 5 years, but having sort of an identity outside of that as a student at a university is really important to me, and I think to a lot of other folks as well. So really ensuring that if you do have these students who are over here, just actively engaging with them, and maybe if you can find a way, if you notice that they post on their initial post about a topic maybe similar to someone else's, help them make those connections, because a lot of times it can be hard for us to do that ourselves. I specifically really enjoy doing that, and I want to interact more with people, but it can be challenging if I'm posting early in the day and other people don't post until 2 a.m. my time, and then having that active ongoing conversation can be really challenging. So it doesn't help to have a little bit of a push from our instructors as well. So we face a unique set of challenges over here, and I think all of our students, including myself, have been able to find a way to make it work. But having that extra level of support from instructors can really be very helpful. So that's all I have.
Kendall, thank you for sharing your experience as a military spouse and kind of representing, a different demographic of some of our students here in Europe and just the military spouses in general. So thank you. And with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Keith Deaton. Keith is a newer instructor here at Worldwide, and he's also a very seasoned student at Embry-Riddle. And so he has a really unique journey to share with us, and currently serves as the Director of Alumni Relations, which also touches another really highly sought after population for Embry-Riddle. So I'm really excited to hear your story, Keith.
Well, thank you, Cody. Jackie, Kendall, great stories. Thank you for sharing, Jackie. That was great. So thank you. Hey, Anne-Marie. Yeah, seasoned is a good word for me. I've been around for 14 years. I graduated back in 2016. So my story is a little bit different, but it's about the human touch. I did my master's via Worldwide with a Master of Science in Management with leadership specialization. And in 2015, my wife and I welcomed our second son, Knox, to the world. So also kind of mid-coursework, to have that conversation with your instructor as you're rushing to the hospital. Hey, I'm not going to be able to get some stuff in the next couple of weeks because I'm a dad again. But having that interaction with your instructor and being able to communicate is something that has resonated with me, especially being, as Cody mentioned, a new instructor for the College of Business within Management 201. And it's been very insightful for me to be as a student three times I graduated from Riddle. But with the worldwide audience is understanding that we all go through things in life. And there's things that if it's the birth of a son or a daughter or an adoption or whatever it may be, we have to be willing to adapt. And that's one thing that's been meaningful to me as an instructor is to listen to the students, kind of like what Kendall and Jackie has already alluded to, but to listen and to be able to be communicated with on multiple levels of different platforms. If it's via text, if it's via phone call, if it's via Zoom or Teams or whatever platform is available to communicate with, but to be there at all times. Because I know for me personally and for my wife, I had to be there to help support her and my home front, as we have another son who's, at the time he was 6, right? Yeah, there's 5 years difference. So he was 6, so I still had to take care of him while my wife was recouping from giving birth to Knox. And it's just being to be able to communicate that with the professor and getting the messages back and the connection. Hey, Keith, it's okay. Take your time. Family comes first. I understand where you're at. I'll work with you as best as I can to make sure that you'll complete this class. So turn it forward over to the teaching aspect for me. I'll do a brief little story of just something that I experienced that I shared earlier when we were just chatting, is the impact of being present with your students, and how impactful that can be. I had to fail my first student, and it was hard for me. And and I'm new, so I'm getting used to it. And I didn't fail him; he failed the course, and I'm understanding that. But is having that dialogue and connection with the student through the entire process, and letting him know that I'm here to help him. Here's my phone. Text me, call me, whatever we need to do. Let's FaceTime, whatever we have to do to see what we can do to make sure that we can get through this program. Unfortunately, there were some issues that came up in his family, and he wasn't able to complete the class. The email came out where I had 3 days left to update the grade. And I was communicating with him and let him know, hey, Antonio, I got 3 days left. What can we do? I believe in you. We got 3 days. Let's push forward. No response. I tried again the next day. No response. The last day, hey, Antonio, I'm sorry. I have to submit the grades. Within probably at least 15 minutes, he responded with an email that it helped me as a professor, but also as a human, to know that he understood the process of what was happening and what happened and why we had to go down this route. And it was great because the last sentence was saying, hey, Keith, when I'm sorry about this, I'm sorry that I didn't fulfill the class, but when I take it again, I'm going to look for your name to take the class again because I enjoyed you as my professor. Even though it was minimal, it was that little interaction, the human touch, that went the extra mile. And I know that speaking for me, I know I had it when my wife was pregnant with Knox. And if I even have to go back, even when she was pregnant with Kyler, our oldest, when I did my first master's at Daytona Beach. So it's about that connection and building that, the network with your professors and being able to communicate back and forth. So that's pretty much my story as a seasoned person.
Yeah, I love the term seasoned. I feel like it's, mature, seasoned. It just has a nice ring to it. Thank you, Keith, for talking about your journey. And I really like how you emphasize networking. I think when I look back to my undergrad at University of Alaska, there was an instructor who taught 3 of the classes I had to take, and he was the only one that taught them. And he wasn't necessarily the easiest instructor to work with, but I also learned the most from him. And networking was that one thing that, fast forward a few years later, I still take with me today, and just the impact it can make. So thank you for the emphasis on that and the human relations and just relatability component. So last but certainly not least, I would like to introduce our 4th panelist, Ms. Dorothy Hosan. She currently works as an undergraduate advisor with the Department of Online Learning. So Dorothy, we would love to hear from you.
Yes, hello. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you guys all for your stories. Are very impactful in different ways. So I did want to start off too by, I noticed that George in his picture, it says Vietnam War. So I just wanted to thank you for your service, and anyone else that's on the call as well. Thank you for your service as well. So I was a traditional student. I started out at Embry-Riddle and I decided to jump right into my classes. I didn't want to wait too long because I had that, pent up readiness to start classes. And so I jumped right in, and I went from doing my undergrad at Ohio State University. So everything was in-person classes for the most part, very minimal online. So I wasn't too used to that online platform of everything being online, not really having an instructor to student communication or relationship. And so, like many students, when they come to the online platform, they might have had some online school that they might have had previous classwork actually in person. And so adjusting to that was a very big, I'm at a loss for words this morning, I feel like, but a very big change for me. So when I started those online classes, I noticed that I couldn't just walk up to my instructor at the end of class and say, I wasn't really understanding this, or I had a question regarding something I read over the weekend or anything like that. And I had a story that when I was in my undergrad, I had just transferred from a community college over to Ohio State. I was just kind of doing some general education there at the community college, went to Ohio State, and I enrolled in my first term. And I had some higher level classes that I never really had to hone in on those higher level classes and what exactly was expected of me. And I struggled that first semester. And I remember I went up to my instructor after class one day and said, I want you to know I'm not this type of student. I'm not the person that does like gets an F on a quiz or doesn't understand the coursework. And having that conversation, he was able to lead me to kind of some resources that I could use to help things that I wasn't really notified of that were out there for me to use, like similar to what Grammarly is now for kind of checking references and coursework, my papers, all of that. So that was a huge help to me. And I have always, ever since that moment, continued on in my educational career in utilizing that. So anytime I could utilize an instructor for any resources or even building that connection with an instructor, I know I had multiple instructors throughout Embry-Riddle, as well as my time at Ohio State, that if I just needed to contact them as like, hey, I was thinking about this career field. Could you kind of answer some questions for me? Even that personal touch that doesn't necessarily create any any direct to the course, but just them as a person has been super helpful for me. And I think that it would be very helpful for students as well. I also wanted to mention too, as an advisor, I hear this from the students as well of like looking for that relationship from their instructor, especially for like scholarships, like references, anything like that. And I think sometimes they're a little intimidated because they think I was there once, I thought this as well, that an instructor is kind of higher over them and there's not necessarily that open door policy as maybe an in-person class would offer. So I always think to myself, put yourself out there. As an advisor, I think to myself this, but put yourself out there, give them as many resources, be as open as you can be with them and honest, and allow them to kind of take that direction and initiative. And that's always been kind of my guidance with my students and how I kind of treat them as their advisor. And I hope that they kind of guide that into their classes as well with their instructors. The other thing I did want to notate too is that in my classes, I had some third-party software, such as like in the marketing class, and some of those others, I took the Masters of Business Administration and Aviation. So we had some third-party softwares that kind of took you to a different place other than being in the course. And I felt that it kind of created a disconnect from the course to the third-party software. And I had some instructors that were really wonderful that helped with, they sent a weekly summary of, hey, last week you guys did this, you could have done this, or here's some tips and pointers, and this is what you did really good. And it felt good to kind of know, okay, we're not doing well here, we're doing great here, and we have a direction of point to kind of move through the class rather than feeling like a little bit in the dark. And I also had another instructor who would send out like weekly like pep talks almost of like and inspirational quotes, all of that. And I thought that that was really nice because it kind of
guided you in those third-party softwares that can be very scary sometimes, and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and just trying to gain traction there. But I hope you all have a wonderful day and enjoy this panel that we're on.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. I love how you talk about just the relationship building and how it is intimidating going if you're used to face-to-face environment, then you go online, but the little things like the letters of recommendation and some of the things where when you had office hours, it was literally walking into an office, which is totally different than, setting up an appointment or, sending emails back and forth or making a phone call without having that face-to-face connection. So I think that's really insightful to share. Thank you so much. So
Cody,
we'd
could
now
I
like
jump
to.
in? Oh,
Oh,
I'm sorry. Can
absolutely.
I jump
Please,
in? Because I
Jackie.
just wanted to comment on what Dorothy said, because when I started my story, I talked more about my personal experience and less about what I do at Embry-Riddle. And she touched on some of that perspective that I have, because I do work for the academic technology team. So many of faces here I recognize, because either I had you or I've worked closely with you in some capacity through that department. And I used to be part of e-learning support. Now I've transitioned to a different role, looking at integrations. And when she mentioned those third-party textbook integrations, and the struggles that students are facing on a daily basis with them, I think it's really important to be aware of those. There's not as many in the COB as there are in other colleges, but all of the different integrations and all the different tools that we have in the classroom, the struggles are very real. We're getting tickets all day long about struggles with how to access the tools or how to use the tools and how to produce work that then they can put into the classroom. And then in addition to that, complaints about those tools really being difficult to use. So I think it's important as faculty to consider what tools are in your courses and what you can do to help make them easier for students to use. We've done a lot on our end in our department to try to create documentation and training stuff and materials that will help students. But some of those tools, those struggles that they have with them, it becomes, are we teaching them how to use that tool, or are we teaching them content? So, those 9-week courses, if they're having to use a million different tools for it, that might be where your students are struggling. And from a student perspective, I had to use, before being in the leadership program, I was in the project management program, and we had to use Palisade. And Palisade was this tool that was a suite of tools that you downloaded, and it was part of your textbook purchase. But it was not clear in the textbook that that's how you would get it. It was not clear in the course that that's how you would get it. So as a student, I started going to Google like I would any other time, and trying to figure out how I'm supposed to purchase this product, this additional product that I'm supposed to use. And I Palisade, if it's not part of an educational process, costs like $2,000 for a year. So I'm here sitting thinking, I'm gonna have to pay $2,000 for this. This is ridiculous. There's no way this is the case. And so after a lot of digging and trying to figure it out on my own, I go to my professor. Professor didn't know a lot about what was going on in the background, and how you were supposed to get it, because that information wasn't in the course. So he didn't really know how to support me either. So it really took me poking around to try to figure out what to do. And I was frustrated, and I was an employee. So I was able to try to ask questions among people at the university. But if I were just a student out there, I would have to, I easily could have just dropped the class and left, like not taken it, not dealt with it, because we have plenty of students that come to us and say, this isn't working. Or then we try to work with them back and forth, and then they get frustrated and they're just like, all right, well, I'm dropping this class because I'm now a week behind. And out of 9 weeks, as we know, if you get a week behind, you're now screwed, right? So I really wanted to touch on that, because I know that not everybody on this call is a faculty developer, or I'm sorry, not a faculty developer, but a course developer who doesn't have maybe the ability to take those things and add more things to the course for all sections. But as an instructor, there are ways that you can go through the process and look at these tools the way that your students are looking at them, to try to find ways that you can help support them when they come with questions. So that's really what I just wanted to say.
No, I love that. It's super relevant, Jackie. And I think integrations are kind of sometimes the elephant in the room, or that great elusive mystery where if you've never used them or taught a class with it or experienced it as an end user, You can only speculate on what it means or, the impact it can have, good, bad, or neutral, sometimes depending on the subject and all the other contributing factors there.
And a lot of times we wait on those end of course surveys to determine where issues are, but those issues with third-party textbook integrations, especially with the setup of them, they begin at the beginning of the term, and by the time they've gotten to the end of the term, either they've withdrawn, so they're not even in the class anymore, or they've gone through the entire course and have forgotten about that first week. So we're not necessarily, we're not capturing as much of those complaints specifically about third-party textbook integrations, but we are getting the tickets about them, and we're getting that feedback from that first week of courses.
Jackie, it also speaks to, we talked as a group earlier before the session, and you were talking about how instructors, if they haven't created the content themselves, that they sometimes kind of pass off things and say, well, that's just how it's designed, or this is how this is, and they don't take the ownership of helping the student make it that extra few steps to where they need to go, whether it is through third party, integration elements, or it's with an assignment or things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Liz.
No, it's an interesting point.
But I've had many conversations with people in group projects where there's been a struggle with an assignment's direction, or where there's misunderstanding, where basically there's just a disconnect between what's happening in the class and what the students are understanding. And those students that aren't working at Embry-Riddle do not understand our structure. They don't know, and they shouldn't know really that we have this IDD team that designs the courses, and then we have instructors that are facilitating those courses. It's not something that they need to know, but they don't know it. So their assumption is that, like a traditional brick and mortar university, the instructor has created their own content. So when you have an instructor that hasn't created that content and then doesn't take ownership of that content, anytime a student goes to that instructor and asks a question and their response is either clearly kind of canned or just refers back to the directions that were already in the course, it becomes one of those situations where you're like, does that person even know what they're talking about? And that's not that kind of environment that we want to create, right? We want the instructor to be able to take ownership of that material in the class as much as the course developer would. And I, having been in those groups where I've heard those students say, well, the instructor couldn't help me, it's disheartening for me, because I'm thinking to myself, well, I know why they couldn't help you, because they didn't design that course. But of course, I'm not going to say something like that. It's frustrating from the student perspective, especially when you don't have the insight. It's frustrating in both regards. If you don't know what's going on in the background, and if you do know what's going on in the background, it can be frustrating. So I just think that little extra step to make sure that not only are you familiar with the content in the course, like the actual material you're teaching, but to understand where those struggles exist so that you can help remediate them. So absolutely. I'm on that. And I was a former teacher as well. I was a math teacher for middle school, and there was plenty of material that we were given that we didn't write. We were told to teach this lesson, but how do we make it our own still within the guidelines of having to stay like with the procedures that the instructors have to have, but just to make it a little bit more your own too. It can come with announcements, of course, but not those announcements where they're posted at 1 a.m. because you have them on a loop and they're a big long piece of text. So just things that are going to be show that there is a person behind that computer and not a machine. And the same way on the other regard. So recognizing that there's people behind the student's computer too. So that human touch is really what it comes down to.
Great points, Jackie.
Thank you.
And just in keeping pace with time and also with the presentation, we're going to go ahead and move along to the Q&A with the student panel. And one of the things I wanted to highlight is the fact that not only do we have students here represented, but they also work with the university in various capacities. We have representation as instructors, academic advisors, directors or campus directors, and also e-learning support. So with that being said, faculty, feel free to jump right in with any questions that you might have for any of our panelists. You can put them either in the chat box or you can raise your hand. But we're going to go ahead and get started. And this question is specifically for Kendall, because you're in a very unique situation. You have a military background, you're a military spouse, in addition to campus director, which means that, and I'm not sure if many know this, but you are a jack of all trades. You're responsible for financial aid, for advising, just the entire campus itself. So based on that, can you just share with us a little bit about either your personal experience or stories that you've heard from other students with regard to good experiences with student interaction or engagement in the classroom, and also not so good? You have any examples for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few things that I can sort of think of in terms of how are, just based on mostly what I've heard from my students in terms of like struggles that they have faced. And I think the primary one that I see is, you know, I'm located at an Air Force base. And so a lot of my students have aviation backgrounds and they know a lot about the aviation industry. But when it comes to some of the classes that are outside of that sort of general realm of knowledge, it can be really intimidating for our students to jump right into these classes with folks who might have a lot of background in business or in writing or in anything along those lines. And so, you know, when I get a student that comes to me that says that I work on F-16s all day, what am I supposed to know about how to run an organization for this business organization class? I don't, they don't really have any idea where to start. And so as an instructor, I think it's always, it would be very helpful if you don't already, is just to kind of assume that like whoever you're teaching has zero knowledge whatsoever on the subject. And that if you see that maybe they're not grasping it as much as they should, or if they're asking questions very frequently about certain things, like reach out to them and see what you can do to help them. And I'm one of those students myself. My background is in higher ed and psychology. Like I don't know anything about the aviation industry. So when I hop into a 500 level business master's class and I'm talking about like designing an aviation company, I have no idea where to start. So making sure that you're recognizing that a lot of people can really be in that position, regardless of what they do, is really important. And then, a lot of our students face like this sort of, I mentioned earlier, this isolation a little bit and kind of feeling like, how do I engage in this college class like it's a college class when I'm 8,000 miles away from whoever it is that's teaching this class? So just finding unique ways to connect with them or to connect them with other students as well, I think can be really helpful in making it feel more like a whole experience to them, as opposed to just a checklist of things that they have to get done throughout each week. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
Absolutely. Okay, Hannah, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, first of all, I just wanted to thank everyone for this panel. It's great. And I'm so excited to be able to hear from the student perspective. I jumped on a few minutes late because I saw it in my email and I was like, students are talking, I want to hear from them. So this is kind of going off of what we were just talking about, and Dorothy, who mentioned how helpful it is to finally kind of reach over that hump of reaching out to an instructor for the first time, realizing how helpful it is, and then being more comfortable to do that again in the future. Because I totally agree. And I remember that same experience from undergrad. So I guess my question would be, specifically from the student point of view, what can I do as an instructor to help students get to that point where they really just feel comfortable to reach out for me? I mean, I try to do all the things that we're supposed to do, announcements, all of those things, but I guess I just really want to know what works for the students and what can I do to really encourage you to just reach out and just say, I don't get this. Because that's all. If a student reaches out to me and says, I don't get this, I'm like, yes, let's work on it. Let me help you. And I'm like beyond excited. So that's my question.
Thank you. So Jackie, can you take that?
Yeah, I think so. Something I used to do when I was teaching, I would send an email to every parent in that of my students that just kind of introduced myself and just reached out to them directly rather than it being an announcement or something along those lines. It was a personal message that I sent to them. So that it's a private message as well, as opposed to being like in those introductory discussion boards. Like, it's great to respond and say thank you, I'm really glad to meet you, all that kind of stuff, but there's something extra personal about it being a direct message to that person that establishes just that open door of, here again, Hannah, you're a real person, so you're there trying to convey that to them. And I think by doing that from the get-go, that could really help for students to feel comfortable throughout those 9 weeks to say, I can go to her, she's going to be okay if I bug her via Canvas inbox, because I think a lot of them are maybe a little bit intimidated. They don't want to bug you, right? And then B, they don't even know how to use Canvas inbox. So if you're initiating that first, then you can kind of create that back and forth and that open door for them. That's my 2 cents.
Perfect. Anyone else? Any other questions from faculty?
There's been a really interesting discussion. I'm sorry, Dorothy, about
okay.
the third party integrations. But yeah, to speak back to, I was going to ask Dorothy too, because she mentioned earlier about this connection and how sometimes students feel like there's a disconnect with the professors. So Dorothy, I'll let you.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of piggyback off of what Jackie said in that initial email or a personal email to those students, especially at the beginning of class, because announcements kind of go to everyone. It's like, okay, it just seems kind of like, okay, you posted it, but it's not necessarily like a personal communication to the student. So that personalized email, I think, really opens that door of, I'm here, and truly there's something about being completely honest, open, and just vulnerable in a sense with a student, and saying, I'm here for you if you need anything, and meaning that. And especially, I noticed in the chat you said that you're going to be teaching Phys 102, and as an advisor, I hear from students so often of, I'm scared to take that class. It's physics. I don't think I could do that class very well. I don't know much about physics. And it's one that they really put off to the end as well, that they're like, I don't want to take that. Do I have to? So I think just being there for them, and that's kind of my advisor approach, is just being honest, being vulnerable, being there for them, and they kind of open up as they see fit, and that kind of creates that relationship. And it's hard, and I think that I advise 400 some students, and I probably have a really good personal relationship with maybe 100 of them, but I do know certain things about all of them. And it's just, I put myself out there, but only so many will take it. And you just kind of have to accept it, of these students will take it and the others won't really take it and care for it. But it's the impact that it makes on that small amount of students that truly guides them for the rest of their educational career, and even on into the professional career as well.
Yeah, and I'll say, I think the times that I feel the most comfortable reaching out to my instructors was in my first class that I took, and I had submitted all my assignments for the first week, and just to one of those assignments, my instructor replied with a video and said, like, hi Kendall, great assignment. I noticed you talked about this, this, and this. And it really kind of like took me off guard, because I think a lot of times we forget that like there is another person, like a real person on the other side of that computer who's grading these, and they know my name, and they actually paid attention to what I wrote about. And maybe if I talked about like a struggle that I had faced in relation to the topic for that week, they're saying, wow, that, talked to me through that and gave me some advice, and like really just kind of showed me that it's not just somebody who sits there, reads, grades, responds, and does some sort of the basic stuff, which was really awesome for me. So.
And to piggyback off what she said too, I have a professor who very clearly responds to every single discussion post that a student submits. They don't do just that bare minimum percentage. They're doing literally every single one. And I've never had a week where she has not responded to a discussion post for everybody. even, and it's not like a big long block of text. It's maybe a couple sentences, but so there's a balance too, because just saying nice job or awesome is not going to be as beneficial as a couple blocks of text or sentences. And then obviously for your time sake, not doing something crazy, but that helped.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on that real quick. I think that's a great point, and that's something that I started to include in my coursework as well, is relaying back to the students in that little section, if it's however I'm communicating, but also letting them know that I've read it. Because there's insight that it's like, okay, well, just like Jackie alluded to, yeah, great job, Jackie. Okay, that doesn't do me much. But saying, hey, great job, Jackie. Thank you for sharing and being personal about your experience. And hey, I hope you're doing well. And just highlighting some of the stuff that you read. Some of the greatest stuff that I've learned some good stuff from my students. They're more, they get better jobs. Well, I hate to say it, but it's like the interesting jobs with what they have. Not better jobs, because I got an awesome job, but interesting jobs working for some great companies. And it's great to have that connection with them on that level, but also giving back and giving them that content where they can see that I'm engaged with them in their coursework and reading it and taking knowledge of it. So that's also a key factor.
And in the same way that we that as faculty, you can tell if a student hasn't put in 100% of themselves to their work, it can be seen on the other end. I had a professor who I got 100 on a presentation that I did, but they did not know that I could see who viewed it, and they did not view it at all. So I mean, those pieces, those little bits of effort that just they show up throughout it. So as long as you're being yourself and being vulnerable and putting in that effort, that's what's going to get them that connection.
And I want to just piggyback on both what Jackie and Keith said. I've been teaching Management 371 for over a year now. I was a student at Embry-Riddle for worldwide for my master's, did leadership, and did my undergrad at Daytona. And I think that it's a unique perspective going from being a student to being an instructor. So you're seeing both sides of it. And I had amazing professors in my leadership program. And I think that's what's helped me be the professor that I am. I do give out my personal cell phone number. I've had students call me, text me. I do announcements, but I also send an email at the beginning. I try to reply to everybody when I can, especially in the introductions. I try to point out little things, oh, that's so great. Oh, I lived in Germany too. Kind of get that little personalization so they know that I'm not just reading it and again going, yeah, great job. Just like Jackie said, getting 100 on something, but you can see they never even looked at it. I try to find 2 or 3 things in everything that I read to kind of reply back to, so the student knows that I'm not just checking the block, that I'm actually invested. I have a spreadsheet that I do, and I put down like little personal information for each person to kind of click. And if I see that there's 2 students in there that may have been at the same military base or have the same interest, I'm like, oh, hey, did you see that Tom also does We're Working Too? You guys should do like a collaboration, or, you can kind of chat. And that kind of gets the students to kind of intermingle with each other as well. And I do video discussion each week to start the discussion. So I kind of talk about what the topic is, my personal experience, and I've gotten a ton of positive feedback on that because again, we're not seeing each other face to face. So just having that interaction for a 2 or 3 minute video, it's like, oh my God, thank you. You're the only professor I've ever had who's done this. So I'm like, okay, I'm on the right track. That's good to know. So
That's a very good point, Anna. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that in our classrooms, you have like multi-generations in there. It can range from generation X all the way up to baby boomers in some cases. And with that, there's different values that students come to the classroom with. So I guess my question is for the student panel. Is that something that you see as being valuable when instructors leverage the technology in the classroom? And for the faculty members, do you feel comfortable leveraging the technology in the classroom to create that personal touch in your course?
Well, I'm not afraid to talk. But yes, it absolutely is super important to me. I think it's really important to understand what those generational differences are in terms of what we're looking for as I fall in the millennial category, and the more you educate yourself on the different generations, but not be I'm trying to think of how I want to say this, but not be locked in on maybe stereotypes you read about those generations. Millennials are lazy or whatever else is out there about us. It's not always true. So I think it's important to consider those pieces, but then also be able to sift through the stuff that's maybe not accurate or that is not applicable to every single student that you have. Secondly, as far as the technology piece goes, I will say it can be frustrating if you feel like your instructor doesn't understand the technology part. I'm a very technically savvy person. That's why I'm in the role that I'm in. And it can be frustrating if even I can't figure it out if they don't know what they're doing with it. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, Jackie, I'm glad that you brought that up because in Management 371, there's video presentations that you have to do. I think it's like 5 or 6 times throughout the course. And I see a lot of people struggle with it. So 2 classes ago, I actually created here's an example of how to do a presentation. And I literally went through the history of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah.
I wanted a peanut butter and jelly sandwich when I was done, but just very simple. Here's what your presentation should look like. Here are the things that you should include. You see my face, you hear my voice. These are things that you have to include. And I also did like a little Word doc because getting in and you click on the link to how to use Studio, it's a little confusing. So I did screenshots. I walked through and said, here's your first step. Here's what it's going to look like. Here's your second step. Here's what it's going to look like. And I attach that Word doc into an announcement. And I say, hey, reach out anytime. I'm here to help you. I know it can be a little confusing, but once you do it one time, you're going to have it mastered. And what confuses people is you have to download it the first time to use Studio, and people are like, oh, it wanted me to download it. I'm like, yes, you have to download it, but after you do it one time, you don't have to do it again. So it's those little pieces that I think help them to see, that it's not that difficult. And then I know Hannah talked about like not having the same view. I learned that the hard way the first class that I taught, because I'm like, why are they not looking at my feedback? And Carrie Hansard helped me. And she's like, well, that's because your view is different from theirs. And because I was a student, I could go in through the student side and then kind of said, okay, you're going to go here, and then you're going to click on this, and then you're going to click on this, and then you're going to look here, and then you're going to see this. So I had the advantage because I was a student to be able to show it from the student side. And a lot of students like, I didn't even know that you could do that. I was just looking right on my paper because I do it in the speed grader, and sometimes I'll attach it, but I try to put all the information in there so they can see it. So because I feel the more information the better you're going to be for both you and the student.
And that's a really good point too, because rather than assuming that the student was wrong and you saying, no, but I put it there, like that arguing back and forth, rather than approaching it from that angle. And instead you were like, well, I maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's something I don't understand about the technology that's in there. We had that problem back when grade posting changed inside of Canvas, where a lot of instructors weren't understanding that their grades, like they could hide the grades, but then they have to post them back again. And students and faculty were getting frustrated with one another. But if we can figure out that disconnect between the technology and what one person is seeing and what the other person's seeing, that's really beneficial. So thank you for that.
Oh my goodness. Thank you guys so much. This conversation is just so rich and so informative, but just in keeping pace with time right now, it's 9:23. So what we want to do as we get ready to conclude is to have the student panel just answer a question just for final thoughts, and you can just jump in at any time. So when you're thinking about future classes, if there was one thing that you could influence in terms of being able to implement in the classroom for student success, what would it be? We'll start with Kendall.
Putting me on the spot here. It's hard for me because I have experience at like a lot of different educational levels at different institutions, and I really do feel like Embry-Riddle has quite an amazing setup for their classes. I've taken a lot of classes at a lot of other schools, so I feel like the setup that we have here really is one of the best that I've seen in terms of readability and usability for students and just like ease of access. the best classes that I have taken with Embry-Riddle, I find that I like them the most because of the integration of these video features that can be used in responses or within gradings and things like that. But I've only had a couple of instructors use that. And so familiarizing, if you're not familiar with how to do that, really learning how to do that just adds that extra level of personal touch to really show that you are not just, like I said earlier, not just a bot on the other side of the screen, but you're a person and you're reading that, and you're there and you're present for these students. That is something that I would say that more instructors should be using.
Keith?
Ditto. No, I think Kendo answered that pretty across the board for me too. For me, being that I graduated a while ago, so I'm a little older, I think, than the majority of the students here. But in 2016, the video was not an option. Although it may have been, but none of my professors used them at the time. But some of the ones that I remember was that personal touch. Vio Anderson, I think I might be pronouncing the first name wrong, but he was a big part of it. I took him multiple times, and it was that personal connection and the ability to connect with him, and the taking, I don't want to say he took the student perspective out of it, but he made it more of a relationship. And he built that network with me where I was able to go to him and trust in him and have that communication with him. And I'm not going to try to drag this out, but I think that's the big part for me as a student, and then also as an instructor, is building that communication, that connective point to it, to network with my students, to help them network through the coursework and build that communication where they feel that they can come to me about anything. So I kind of full circle is just is being there, is being present in the moment, to definitely help the students out.
Thank you. Dorothy?
Ditto times two, but I also have kind of a point that's a little different. I think that one thing that would be kind of fun for like classes that I did have or was kind of fun, and then for classes that if I was to take more, would be kind of like the ability to use my creativity, because students have all sorts of different levels of experience, and especially with technology, all of that, and being able to use that creativity. I'm not sure if this is allowed in the classes, but being able to kind of bend, rather than using this PowerPoint as a presentation, allowing them to kind of go above and beyond and maybe make a video or graphic design or anything like that that allows them to kind of use their creativity to assist that. And also, one thing I really enjoyed in my classes, because similar to Kendall, I did not have any aviation background as well, and I enjoy the aviation field. I don't necessarily have an aviation, passion. So in some of those classes where aviation was required, some of the instructors were able to say, you can do whatever topic you want. So instead of writing my paper on an aviation airline or anything like that, I would maybe choose a business of choice in my master's classes. And I enjoyed that because it was something that I cared about, and I put a lot more effort into it than maybe something I didn't care as much about. So.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. And Jackie?
Yeah, thank you. So the biggest thing that my response to that question would be about taking the ownership of the material that you are teaching. So in particular, focusing when you're providing that feedback to like essays or just in general, when you're providing feedback, that feedback is not heavily focused on, for example, APA, that you're including what the content of that module is. I know that there are some instructors who really rely heavily on commenting on that APA formatting, which is important. It's important to have APA correctly formatted, but there's not really a lot of information about what's the content in that paper. Are the students actually grasping that and giving that kinds of feedback? So what I would like to see in more courses is bringing that kind of feedback in, so that not every paper is based off of the feedback's based off of APA.
That's a good point. It's important for that feedback to be balanced and not just focused in on one area.
And that takes the ownership piece of it as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here, and the floor is all yours, Liz.
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I've learned a lot today. There's been massive amounts of conversation going on in the chat. There's been conversation here. But to me, the thread I see are those relationships, the people. The machines do what they do, but we've got to connect to each other somehow. And I think that's really the kind of the overarching thread that I'm seeing through all of the insight that all of you bring by coming on this panel. So thank you all so much. And I want to also kind of promote what we're doing next, which is on, let me make sure I get the right date, April 14th at 11 a.m. Eastern. We're going to be talking kind of a coffee and conversation about burnout, because as instructors, we give of ourselves, students as well, but we've only got so much in our tanks, right? So we're putting out an article that just came out recently in the Chronicle by Flower Darby, who's a well-known faculty developer and instructor herself, but it's on 8 strategies to prevent burnout. And so we'll be sending that information out. Also, one more plug for me, I'm giving a session next week on trust and using Turnitin as a teaching tool. So that kind of piggybacks a little bit off of what Keith was talking about, that trust that he felt with his instructors. And I think that that's something that kind of plays into how we use some of the tools in classes and how we use Turnitin. So, but thank you all so much for coming, and we hope you have a wonderful day. And thank you so much to our panelists. We couldn't have done it without you, and y'all are all amazing. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.